Hello and welcome to the Surly Side Gamer Club. This is Jason, aka GreywolfZX's, and this is day 4 of my Xbox modding project. Today I am going to be hacking in these USB ports. So what I'm going to do is just take this USB connector out of here, the black one there. You got to kind of rock that up, and then it pulls out. That rocking motion's still kind of difficult. You can see on the little camera here that there is a hole in there now. Here's our USB. Here's the Xbox version of the USB ports. These cables should just be all the same, so what I'm going to I should move my junk and then talk. Alright, so color cable codes on the Xbox USB versus a standard USB should be the same except for these yellow wires. The yellow wires are to support light guns for shooting games. And I'm going to leave those untouched because I don't have a corresponding wire here. And then comparative wise, those two yellows, that gives me 10 wires for 2 plugs, and here I have 10 wires for 2 plugs, but the reason I've got 10 wires here is because I've got these 2 out on the edge here, and those are, I'm trying to find the best way to show this. Yeah, let's bring it over here to the close-up camera. So those 2 black wires there, and if you flip it over, they go to these 2 pins right here and on the farthest edge, and those 2 pins are part of the ground plane. So all those are is extra grounds, and I don't think I need the extra grounds. Now I wanted to get fancy with this and put a removable clip in, but I searched and I just couldn't find anything I liked, and for some reason for this particular step it seemed wrong to order something off the internet. I really decided it should work with something I already have. So, whoop, I didn't expect that to happen. Oh, that's the ground. I clipped the end off there and just pulling on the wire to straighten them out, and the whole cover came off there. So that wire is completely uncovered at this point. I wonder if they're soldered in underneath this shrink wrap. Could be. Well, let's see. I'm going to grab the other black one and we'll pull on it a little and just see. Nope. So it's just that one that came apart like that. That's interesting. I wonder why those are done different. But not important. So I think I'm going to end up tying my grounds all together. So we see if we can pull the other one off on the other side. Yep, interesting. Okay. And when I say tie them all together, what I mean is I'm just going to tie the one without insulation and the one with insulation currently together, and then I'll hook those to a single black here, since there's one per connector. Alright, now I've got these fancy little wire strippers, but they don't seem to work well up close. Yeah, that just barely got the end off of that. Could be partially user error, or it could be that they're really more intended for larger gauge electrical, which is what I suspect. So we'll see if we can do the other trick of just burning the insulation off, which is what I want to try and do on these guys here. And then I'm going to use the super secret hot glue method to cover up and insulate my connections. So I'm just going to go, let's see. Yeah, that didn't work so good, did it? I was hoping that this camera angle would give a clearer picture, but unfortunately the camera just doesn't have the resolution for it. And this one, I don't know. Come on. I can feel that it's through, but when I'm over putting the wire in front of that camera, I can't see what I'm doing. Well, I guess I could try and lean this one down a little. Yeah, I got the insulation away on that. Begs a very interesting question. What is the green wire compared to, I'm sure we could look up a USB wiring guide or pin out, or yeah, pin out wiring guide, the whole thing. Okay. Let me set this down so I don't burn myself while trying to muck with this. And I'm going to, so there you go. You can kind of see the wire there if I can get it the right distance. So I've burned the insulation off, so I've got a spot there where I can solder my wire on. So I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of these, we'll say, stripped back, and then I'll solder it up. I don't remember if I mentioned this in a previous video, but these USB connectors here I got off of a Dell monitor. It's actually the Dell monitor that's so blurrily focused right there, missing the bezel. And I actually got a bunch of those because I got a bunch of these Dell monitors that had bad capacitors and people were throwing them away. So I took them, replaced the capacitors, and got working 17-inch monitors. But I didn't bother to plug the USBs back in because I didn't put the casing back on, so there wasn't anything to really hold them correctly. It does screw on, but it just didn't look quite right. So now I've got those, this is extra, and so I figured, you know what, I got a ton of these things, let's hack one in and see if I can make that work for the USB. And I'm just going to assume that the coloring is universal or identical between these two devices. I'm sure there's a standard for it, but that doesn't mean that that's what was actually used. Okay, so now you can see that I've hacked on those wires, and the yellow is left unaccosted. And now let's get the other side. I think I stripped away much more of the insulation than I really need to. And I'm trying not to sniffle, but unfortunately something's beginning to make my nose go. I think it's this, I'm going to call it spring weather. And I'm calling it spring weather because although it's, what, May 25th, we had snow here a week ago. Alright, so I'm completely removing the insulation on a small section. I melt it away on one side. That allows me to pull it back, and I'm just moving the iron back and forth until I can feel the tip rubbing on the wire. I can also hear it. I don't know if, I'm pretty sure the microphone's not picking that up. So then I tear it back, so it's got, wow, you really can't, so it's got a little piece hanging off, and then I'm using my, I've got the scissors here, but this stuff's so thin, it's easy enough to just use my fingers to strip that off. or to rip off the little hanging piece. Come on. You know, I started to mumble earlier that I wanted to put a connector in here for this, and you know, I checked locally, but I could have ordered something off the internet, but for some reason it just didn't seem right. And I searched through my stash of junk, electronics junk, you know, basically donor parts, and could not find a connector. Because I wanted to make this so it would come apart. But, as you can see, I didn't find one. You know, I wanted a connector because I didn't want to have to leave this inside the Xbox or worry about desoldering it. And I did buy off of the internet one of those Xbox to USB adapters, so it plugs in here and then has the USB jack on it, so that you can just plug in a memory card, you know, a USB stick, and that just felt like cheating in the spirit of this project. And since I didn't mention it earlier, the whole point to this, because I don't own an Xbox memory stick, is to evidently you can use a USB flash drive as an Xbox memory stick. And instead of having an 8 meg Xbox memory stick, I'm going to have like a 100, or I don't remember how big that is, but a couple gigs. And according to the internet at large, this is not a difficult thing to do. You know, if it's formatted FAT32, I think it just will show up on the Xbox. Well, looks like I'm just going to use my fingertips to strip this stuff. It's not working as well as thought. Okay, so melt it back a little bit, and then just yank a little bit off the end there. I just need to get enough exposed to solder it on. You know, typically you want the wire to wrap around so that you get a good solid connection, but I really don't expect to be yanking on this, and in the end I think this connector will end up being tucked inside, kind of left there, so that I can if I ever need it, I can pop the top off and use it. Wow, that look. If you look at the ends there, just barely, come on, focus, barely got any of, looks a lot bigger on camera, on that camera, but barely got any of the insulation off of the wires. I also considered maybe using USB extension cables and then just plugging them into here and running the other connector to the back of the Xbox and putting some USB ports on the back. Now, you can't use the controller, the Xbox controller port, and this USB port at the same time. They're wired in, you know, concurrently, and so it won't be able to differentiate between the two, and you'll end up with some sort of electrical collision. The long and the short of it is, it won't work. And there are some very fancy mods about putting in relays so that you can, when you don't have a controller connected, it will switch over and enable USB ports. And I haven't decided if I want to go that route yet. It's taken me actually quite a bit of time to get back to doing this just for this part, which is, which was disappointing to me, because I wanted to try and get an hour in a night, or at the very least a week. and now it's been like 2 weeks or so, but I hadn't done anything. Alright, let's see. Yeah, I had really hoped that this connector could be pulled off, but it seems that these are, oh yeah, these wires push through and they're actually soldered through, and that plastic connector is just there for protection's sake. I have torn one of these apart before. Now I remember that. Well, this would be interesting. I kind of doubt my own dexterity on this one. Oh yeah, pull them apart, don't want to confuse. That would be just horrid to get half the wire, half the wires from one USB connector get them half on one side and half on the other, so they're crossed. That would just be the idiot move of the year. Which, yeah, unfortunately I could see myself doing that if I weren't paying attention. So you're going to get down here, start getting this connector twisted. And I can see it being very easy to get myself confused. Okay. I'm probably, given how small, or how little of the shielding I pulled off on these, I might have to go through and check with my multimeter to make sure I've got continuity. That one actually went quite well. And the irony of it is, while I was saying that, and I got the soldering iron in closer, the insulation melted back further. So yeah, I've got a really, well, we'll call it an acceptable solder joint going on there. Not your long-term type of thing if it's going to be in high use or abused. And I changed my mind on the grounding I've left unshielded, or that I pulled the insulation off. I am just going to leave those unhooked. It'll be funny if I have to, in a future video, discuss how that was a bad decision and it made the USB not work. But seeing as how this is just an outright experiment anyway, I figured worst case scenario, if this goes wrong, I can probably get a replacement one of these off the internet, and then I could just use this connector here I've got another one of these somewhere, get it wired in, and then just be able to throw that in if I need USB ports. And in essence, unplug the one that'll be in the Xbox, plug this in, do whatever I want to do real quick, and then move everything back. Okay, I'm going to try and get the white wire here. And it's amazing to me how I think, oh, this will be a quick little video, and then I muck about and muck about and muck about. Okay, another poorly done solder joint. Okay, last two wires for this side. This would make Ben Heckendorn cringe. Although, in all fairness, he might have even started out this way, and just through experience got a lot better. Get on there. Ow. Well, that one's not so good. That's funny. the insulation for the two wires melted together. That is a really poor solder joint. Okay. Now we're on to the green wire. I'm trying to pay careful attention so as not to melt the connector here. Come on. And then all my previous joints are in the way, and like I said, I wasn't terribly happy with how they turned out, but they're sufficient for carrying electricity, and because this will be, like I said, tucked inside the console and not used too often, I suspect that these won't be a high stress point. So, well, I'm also gonna try and put a little hot glue and insulate this, and always the last wire on the side is just gonna fight me. So I don't think any solder stuck right there. That's interesting. The solder just does not want to stick to this wire here. So do it the proper way to solder is to put your iron on the back side of the wires and heat it up, and bring your solder up to the front side of the wires so the heat's passing through, and then the solder will flow through the joint and you get a nice solid joint instead of having it just shall we say scabbed on the top. It'll actually flow through the wires and form a nice solid bond. Okay, so red, white, black, green. Red, white, black, green. Yeah, they're so short. Okay, heck job for the ages. That actually worked really well on that last green one that was giving me so much trouble. I was able to hold the wires together, put the soldering iron on them, and then that worked pretty well. Did the proper soldering technique, but I used the soldering iron to push the wires forward and touch it against the solder, and it flowed through my joint. So, trying to do that again here. And I'm sorry I keep going behind that other camera. I should just turn that off so that I'm not in the way of myself. Alright, that's kind of hooked around now. Get the end of my solder up so that I can touch it. Didn't look like you're going to cooperate, so the darn heat's transferring through the wires while I'm doing this. It hurts. There we go. Man, I should probably just retouch all those other solder joints I did. The way that's working, I'm getting proper technique, and sorry, I'm huffing because I'm mad at myself because I start to mumble while I'm doing this, and the whole point is to share my experience, and if I'm busy mumbling it, no one can hear me. But I also was going to do these videos unedited, and I've decided I'm going to edit them now because one was so bad. It wasn't horrible, but it took a long time, and I leaned in and out on the microphone and mumbled a whole bunch, so man, and there I am right there again underneath the... So disappointing. Now, the best camera I have is the one that's currently shooting my left hand, and you can't see anything else, but it's also mounted in my laptop, so I can't really aim it as well as the other ones. And that was a poorly done joint. Whoop. Come on. Wow. Okay. Last two wires on this side. Use a little solder that's left on the soldering iron, put it up to the tip of these wires, and it's melting the insulation back a little further. I pause every time I go to say insulation because for some reason I want to say sheathing, and that runs through my mind every time before I do this. It also bothers me how I talk and then stop and seem to not finish thoughts. I drive myself insane watching my own videos. So I can't even imagine what other people are thinking if they see this. Come on. And one more cruddy solder joint. Here comes the last one. Holy crud, this is a hack job. Yellow wire, you better get out of there so that I don't melt you to something else. Alright. Wow. Okay. The very hacky soldering job is complete. Oh man, that is not something to be proud of. You can see how that's all hacked together there. So let's make sure they're not touching, and I'll put little dabs of hot glue over these guys. See if I can clean that up a little bit.